So now we're going to be talking about how to create the quiz activity. So first we need to make sure you're at your course page, turn editing on, go on to the section that you want to add a quiz and click on add an activity, and then we're going to go down and locate quiz. And we go and click on that and it'll take us to the quiz creation page. In the general section, you need to give the quiz a name. So we're going to call this section 1 quiz. And remember, this can be a test, a quiz. There's a number of different variety of uses for it, so it doesn't have to be just a short quiz. In the introduction, I can give the students some basic instructions. So complete the quiz. And notice you can do bulleted list, numbered list, pictures, all that kind of stuff if you need to. Open the quiz and close the quiz determines when the quiz is available to take. So if I want to check that, I can enable the date and time that it opens and the date and time that it closes. If I want to specify a time limit, I can do that by checking the enable box and then typing a number here and choosing minutes, days, hours, seconds, and so on. So if I wanted to make sure they only had 1 hour to take the test or quiz, then I can do that, and they have a time limit associated with it now. Attempts allowed, this determines how many attempts a student can take. I can choose unlimited, which means that they can take it over and over and over again as many times as they want. I can choose 1, 2, and so on. So I typically choose 1 unless I want the student to be able to retake it. If I choose something like 3, for example, then I'll get the grading method box will be available. And all that means is, how is the overall grade going to be calculated? Does it take the highest grade of the 3 attempts? Does it average all 3 attempts together and that's their grade? Or does it give their first or last attempt the grade? So for example, you could give them 3 attempts, but regardless it's going to take the first attempt. In the grade section, we have the grade category. If you want to assign a category, you can do that. Otherwise, just leave it uncategorized. Layout, this is important for determining how the questions will be laid out in the quiz. If you leave it as shown on the edit screen when you get to the section regarding creating the quizzes themselves, the questions and everything, then you'll have, as shown on the edit screen, whatever you put the questions in the edit screen is what they'll appear as. Otherwise, you can have it shuffled randomly. And what that means is that it doesn't matter how you have it set up in the edit screen. When it pulls it up, each student will see it differently. Typically, I use shuffled randomly. I can also choose new page, either every question, every 2 questions, and so on, all the way up to every 50 questions. Depending on the length of the questions, I typically choose something like every 5 questions. And all that does is it shows them 5 questions at a time instead of having the entire test there in front of them, which can be a little overwhelming. If you want to, you can just choose never, and all the questions will show, and they go straight down the page. It's completely up to you, and depending on the length of the test or quiz, you may want to change that. Question behavior, shuffle within questions. If you choose yes, this does not mean that it automatically shuffles within each question. It just means that it's allowed to shuffle within each question. So when you actually create the questions, it will give you the option of shuffling within that question. But don't think by choosing yes that it shuffles every single question's answers. You can do that on your own when you create the questions. So I typically leave this as yes, just in case I want to shuffle the answers when I create those questions. How questions behave, you have a number of different options here, and this is directly tied to what you see down here in review options. Deferred feedback is typically what most people will choose, and what that means is that you don't see any of what you got right or wrong or the answers until you've completely completed the quiz. If you want, you can do adaptive mode, and you also have adaptive mode with no penalties. And adaptive mode allows a student multiple tries at the same question in the same attempt. The question can change, give hints to adapt to a student's answer. This setting also allows the teacher to apply penalties for each incorrect attempt at a question. For example, if a question has an overall point value of 10 and a student answered the question incorrectly the first time and then answered it correctly the second time, you could set the penalty factor up so that the student may only receive 8 points towards their overall grade instead of 10. If you use adaptive mode with no penalties, it's the same as normal adaptive mode, except for, as we discussed earlier, the penalties are no longer applied. So that's adaptive mode and adaptive mode with no penalties. Deferred feedback, like I said, you get all the information at the end of the test. Deferred feedback with CBM is stands for certainty-based marketing. Certainty-based marking, and all that means is that as the students answer the question, they can also tell you how certain they feel that that answer is correct. So they may feel very certain that's correct or not so certain, and that gives you a gauge of how well the student feels they know the knowledge or the content of the test. And then you have immediate feedback, which means that they get the answer, they get whether it was right or wrong immediately after they answer the question. And then you have immediate feedback with certainty-based marking, which, as we mentioned in deferred, is the confidence that the student has in the answer that they provide. Interactive with multiple tries simply means that it allows students to multiple attempts at that question and provides hints based on their incorrect responses to help guide them towards the correct responses. Penalties can also be applied like adaptive mode, which we mentioned earlier. And then you also have manually graded, and what that means is you will, as a teacher, manually grade responses, and students will see the results once the quiz is graded. I typically only don't do that if you have all essay questions, which you would have to grade anyways. Each attempt builds on the last. You have two options here, yes or no, and what that means, if you choose yes and multiple attempts are allowed, students' responses to the most recent attempt will be automatically filled into each of the answer fields so the student can see what they answered in the last attempt. So it allows them to see previous attempts. And then review options. During the attempt means that this is what they get to see when they're actually taking the quiz. And you'll notice that if I change this to adaptive mode or to interactive with multiple tries, it changes what check marks are available. Or if I do deferred feedback, you'll notice that that they're grayed out, which means that they're not available, they're not being used. You'll notice I can give overall feedback as well, but it's grayed out. So deferred feedback means they get nothing during the attempt. Immediately after the attempt means that once they have actually submitted all their answers, these are the things they'll see. And you'll notice that they actually have checks and they're not grayed out, which means they get to see all these things. So if you want to say, well, I want to let them see the attempt and whether it's correct, marks, and all that kind of stuff, but I don't want them to see the right answer, then I can uncheck right answer. Later, while the quiz is still open, means that they finished the quiz, but it's still open and available for them to go back and maybe review. So if you use, like, let's say 4 quizzes in a chapter leading up to the chapter test, you may want to leave this available to them and open so they can go back and review their questions and answers as a study guide for the chapter test. After the quiz is closed means that you've closed the quiz, meaning it's no longer available for them to go in and take, and you can still make it available for them to see and review information on the quiz even after it's closed. And once again, that's up to you. So maybe if you get all 4 quizzes in the chapter test done, at that point you may want to remove all these so they can't see any of that information and go back and review it. In the display section, you have show the user's picture, which just means they see their picture when they're taking the quiz. And decimal places and grades, I typically leave this as 0. Just makes it simpler because it rounds it for you. Decimal places and question grades, you can choose same as for overall grades, which is this, or you can actually specify how many decimal places you want in each particular question grade. Showbox during quiz attempts, if you choose yes, then they'll be able to see the blocks that we mentioned on the left and right sides. I typically leave no because I don't want them accessing anything outside what they can see on the quiz itself. Extra restrictions on attempts. I can require a password for the students to go in and be able to take the quiz. So if I want to do that, then I can type that in here, and then I can check unmasked to actually see what it is, what the password is. Required network address, you're not going to want to use that. Enforced delay between first and second attempts. All it means is you can put a time limit, such as 15 minutes between attempts, which may require them to go review some things that they got wrong before they actually do their second attempt. Enforced delay between later attempts means that if you had, say, for example, 4 attempts, then you could set the first attempt they have a 15-minute delay, and maybe the third and fourth attempt they only have a 5-minute delay between each of those attempts. Browser security, I typically use full screen pop-up with some JavaScript security. All that means is that it takes up their entire screen, so they don't have any tabs that they can open or anything like that and try to access outside content. So it makes it a little bit easier for them to stay focused on the quiz and nothing else. And then you have your overall feedback, and basically all this is saying up if the student made between a 90 and a 100, you could say, great job, you got an A. And if they made between, let's say, a 90 and an 80, then you could tell them you got a B, not bad, and so on. And so you could go here and provide general feedback to the students based on what grade they achieved on the overall quiz. Notice they'll see this once they've finished taking the quiz. If you want to add more feedback fields and do it by 5-point increments or however you want to do it, you can do that as well. Then common module settings section, you can choose which group mode you want. If you're using groups, then you might want to choose separate groups for classes, visible groups if you have groups within the class, and then you can also choose your particular grouping, so separate groups, and then if I have groups available, I can choose how to group them. And then visible, show, or hide. Show means that the quiz will be on the screen and be available for students to see as soon as I'm done creating it. Hide means that it'll be invisible until I turn it on. And then ID number, I can give an ID number to the quiz once so that I can see in the grade book and identify it. Click on Save and Display. And here's my start of my quiz, and you'll learn more about creating the questions and working with the attempts and grades in the Using a Quiz section.